Council, do you want us to wait a little bit? You bet. We'll hold on for just a bit.
I was confused why you would have anything to do with that. But, yeah.
Okay, super. Welcome, everyone. I just want to reiterate something that we've been chatting about over the last couple of weeks, and that is the intro to our budget discussion. This budget will meet or exceed the town's reserve balance policy for operational funds, and Zionsville's municipal budget, which has been flatlined over the past several years, will see some new investment. Shortly after I came into office, the COVID-19 pandemic began, and we took a conservative approach to our spending. As a result of this prudent fiscal management, we have grown our DLGF fund balances by over 6.6 million, which is nearly 30% since I took office on January 1st, 2020. Now, with an estimated 9% increase in revenue for 2023, we begin a renewed focus on investing in capital expenditures, community demands, and town personnel. For the past 3 years, we have created the building blocks that have culminated in this strong financial position. This proposed budget allows us to maintain our healthy general fund balance and create an operationally sustainable budget with a focus on capital expenditures that we have long saved for. We are ending 2022 with over $57 million in fund balance, more than when we started in 2020, and I look forward to tonight's dialogue. A few highlights. So our DLGF fund balances are now over 6.6 million, nearly 30% increase that I just shared with you. 55% of the overall proposed budget is centered around public safety. The 2023 budget includes an increase of $5 million to police and fire. And we're ending 2022 with over $57 million in non-DLGF and DLGF fund balance as of September 2022. This budget includes 15 new positions, 5 police, 3 fire, 3 planning, 1 finance, and then 3 more for DPW. This the funding that we are proposing in this budget, it really does demonstrate what our priorities are as a community in terms of moving forward with our actions. So the funding is really just the starting point in order to realize the activities and the goals and the objectives set by each of our department heads. And this particular slide really helps to package it all up in one spot. We have the building blocks available to us through our strong financial position to really invest in new ways within our community. I'm excited for the investment that we're proposing to put into public safety, which includes hiring 3 police officers, 3 for our schools and 2 for field patrol, and hiring 3 new firefighters. We have looked at an opportunity to create a public safety building. I know the town has invested time and energy into thinking through future buildings and facilities for departments in our town that are in need of a refresh or better space. The building where the DPW team has exited out of and due to their move over here into town hall, that is now largely being used by some of our DPW staff, but mostly our police department is in bad shape. And we need to think through how we're going to replace that building, how we're going to relocate that staff into a new facility. And I look forward to early next year, this fiscal year, working with a team of folks and including members of council and members of the staff and looking through how we move towards a new public safety building somewhere in the town. We've got options available to us from a land acquisition standpoint, and we've got a lot of good ideas from our fire chief and our police chief. And I'm hopeful that we can sit down and take a look at what our needs might be and how we move forward with planning for that new space. I'm particularly excited about providing a 4% cost of living increase for our town personnel. It's still not keeping up with inflation, but it's keeping up with the maximum amount of dollars that we have that we can put aside for staff. And I know that in talking with many of you on council, you share that same desire to invest in our town's personnel. The infrastructure projects, we'll hear more about each of these from Lance and others. And then finally, our parks and quality of life opportunities, real exciting things that we've talked about in a variety of different places, but we'll get to talk about a little bit more here tonight. Kelly, I'm going to hand this over to you so you can walk through the numbers for us.
Good evening. All right, well, I get the more boring part, just showing you all the numbers. So the first slide we have, for me, total spending by department. So we've just done a breakdown just to show what is the difference between the 2022 budget to what's being asked for in the 2023 budget. It's very reflective of what the mayor has just been speaking about, showing the increase in what we've for public safety. We've moved some things around and we've done some things that it's hard to tell exactly what's happened in here, but we'll get to that when we get to the different departments. But I think this is just really reflective to show, I mean, most of this, besides public safety, really is been kind of at a flatline budget part. So these are our DLGF fund balances. These are our tax supported funds. This is, the mayor, just to reiterate what Mayor Emily was saying, we have very healthy fund balances. Certainly certainly through COVID. I believe that the town of Zionsville was very cautious in their spending. And so we're hoping that this budget really gets to kind of celebrate how cautious you were. We get to make some really good changes to the town of Zionsville. All right, so one thing I do want to highlight here is our expected revenue growth. We got some exciting information, and we got our certified net assessed value recently. They're up 24%. So actually this 9.3% expected revenue is actually quite a bit larger than that. I would say closer to 16% roughly. Looking at Tim, to give you a yes or no, but our expected revenue growth is higher than this. And we just received those numbers as of Monday, I believe. So
Did you say 60?
16.
16.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the net assessed values were certified earlier, or we obtained information from the county that the net assessed values were certified earlier this week. We've worked that into the revenue expectations and the levy expectations accordingly. It will certainly have impact in the amount of CCD dollars that will be collected because that is a flat rate. The net assessed value increases of 24% will really drive down tax rates for the taxpayers of Zionsville because your levy growth goes up 5%, but your net assessed value has risen 24%. So what that will do in essence is drive down that pressure on rate. Additionally, it should drive down pressure on circuit breaker impact. We have not taken that into account. What we did use, as we discussed earlier, we used the numbers that were estimated by DLGF. I believe those are very conservative numbers, and quite frankly, we should expect less than the stated circuit breaker impact accordingly. From some of the changes that you might see in this version than what was in the original version is a longevity pay was included across the board. I believe that had an impact of somewhere around 280, thank you, $280,000. And additionally, from that, it was based on some of the responses that council made and the desire of the council and the mayor to give credit to the hard work of the Zionsville town employees, takes into account a bonus that would be taking place potentially with your approval this year. And so that was deducted from, or that was added as an additional appropriation for 2022 and is reflected in the fund balances of 2023 as well. That bonus is anticipated that it could come from the general fund, but you certainly have other sources of which you could use. In 2016, the town received a special LOIT distribution, and yes, it was still called LOIT at that time, local option income tax. And there remains a balance of approximately $432,000 from that 2016 special distribution of LOIT funds that the town has on their books. The cost of the proposed bonus would be just over $500,000. So the majority of that could come from, if you would choose, a transfer of those special LOIT funds into the general fund and then augmenting the general fund with those dollars. That would lessen the impact and raise the 2023 ending balances of the general fund accordingly by that $400,000+. So the proposed bonus of 3.8% would equate to approximately one paycheck by that an additional paycheck dollar.
Okay, so I am the first to go forward with presenting my budget, which includes my own salary and then some services and other charges dollars that we typically use in the past couple of years for travel, training, and also for promotions directed almost entirely for the staff. Special lunches, things like that. Any questions for me? And here is the overall administration budget. No staff except for, actually that's Julie and Carol and Amanda. Yeah, so 3 folks in this particular. Is it just 2? Amanda's in her own. Okay. We changed it up from last year. And a small supplies budget, and then our services and charges are primarily attorney's fees with with some communications, PR contract as well.
Is there a breakout on that last one? I mean, I know 3729 of the attorney charges and then other contracted charges.
Yes, we could get that for you for sure. It's all going to be contractual services in that particular area. So they'll all be
Right, yeah.
contracts. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Skip the slide at the beginning, but I will add that the breakdowns of all the department budgets are online on our website. We have that link at the beginning, but for the public or anyone else that wants to see what's in each of these categories, personnel services, supplies, services, charges, capital, et cetera, those Form 1s are on our website. So I'll kick it off with communications. This is a net neutral operations budget from last year. It's flatlined. Some of the items that it goes towards is printing and postage for the quarterly postcards that we send out to all residents in Zionsville. This is on behalf of all of our departments. It's important high-level updates that we share in the mail directly with residents. We found that more and more people are saying not everyone's on social media, and with the algorithms that are part of social media, not everyone sees important things like leaf collection and all the services that we provide. So we add that information to postcards. It goes towards our annual report, and it goes towards magazine partnerships. So with our Parks Department, for example, we have inserts into magazines oftentimes. So like the Winterfest Guide that we did last year. For contractual services, it goes towards graphic design partnerships, videography partnerships, and then any professional photography services. And then also within services is promotional, so swag that we purchase and social media, advertising and boosted posts. And that includes, any of our departments that are on social media, fire department, police department, et cetera. And then any ad packages that we purchase. Exactly. That's also, it's operationally flatline.
I have a question to help me as we move forward. And this could be for the mayor or Joe. On all of these salaries that we're seeing in each breakout, is the 4% cost of living, is that flat across the board, or it's a 4% budget that you have some flexibility on how you adjust the 4%? And those are baked into what we're already seeing here. And no, I understand that. I'm just making sure the 4% already here, and then the longevity tank, that goes in where it would be applicable already in the budget we're seeing as that second budget.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Janice Stavanovich. I'm Planning Manager with Community and Economic Development. With me tonight is Owen Young, who's the Economic Development Manager, and Chrissy Koenig, who's Permitting and Inspection Manager and Municipal Action Center. Noting our budget, that would be for administration to address, but we appreciate being asked to be with you tonight to share our perspectives related to the 3 career positions related within the Community and Economic Development Department. That would be a Planner 1, a Permit Tech 1, and a Building Inspector. I would like to speak specifically about adding a Planner 1. With 15 years of serving the town of Zionsville, presently I manage the Plan Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals petitions. The volumes of petitions over the years have certainly increased and intensified with several complex projects. In 2021 and in 2022, numerous Plan Commission petitions caused 6 special meetings. That's a second meeting in the same month in order to hear new and continued business. Your planning department consists of 3 people, including myself. Our request is for an additional planner who would support both BZA and Plan Commission petitions. This would allow for the sharing of workload, particularly when present employees want or need time out of the office. Our team continues to demonstrate every day their dedication to the town by providing additional work hours when needed, which often results in additional time off being awarded, which provides some employees more time out of the office that often cannot be taken due to workload. An additional resource to our team would also provide us the opportunity to review and streamline our internal workflow. We envision this position to be familiar with a project from its inception, following it through the entitlement process, assisting in pre-construction and turnover meetings, and to be a point of contact in site compliance until the project's completion, ensuring that the project the town has approved is the project that's built. Related to all 3 positions, let me assure you that the employees of CED are dedicated to each other and to providing the town of Zionsville with excellent service. No project has suffered due to workload. An additional team member would provide present employees with an improved work-life balance, increase interdepartmental communication, and provide an additional resource for future projects. If there's no questions for me, I'll turn this over to Owen for some statistical information. Yes.
Hi, I'm Owen. I get the distinct pleasure to go over the numbers. The phrase that pays is 2/3 to targeted budget goal. So halfway through the year, we were 2/3 to our budgeted goal this year. And that kind of shocked me when I was informed that with Cindy Ford. Thanks so much for getting that information. I wanted to highlight from a very high level our revenue from 2021 to 2022. As last year ended, we are projected at 38% above last year's hard numbers at the end of the year for revenue. So we are on track to be 38% above that. And if it's anything like last year where we projected it and where we actually landed, we will probably be above that. Just wanted to set the deck chairs with those numbers to further expound upon what Janice has already touched on with our increased workload. As you can see, Plan Commission and BZA petition totals, they do nothing but increase. As she stated previously, 2021 through 2022, we had 6 special meetings. That is on top of the already regularly scheduled meetings throughout the year to get that additional workload done. Relatively self-explanatory, I hope. Next slide, please. Obviously, anything that goes through Plan Commission BZA that gets entitlements through our development track, it then turns into ILPs, building permits, inspections. This is our inspections from 2010 till 2022 projected. Again, relatively self-explanatory, but really wanted to hit that as far as the continuum of all of our workload. Starts at Plan Commission BZA, rolls through our permitting process and inspection process, and it'll come right back around as far as walk-ins with questions and compliance with all questions. Here's Chrissy.
Hi, thanks again for having us tonight. I have been fortunate enough to be here with Zionsville for almost 10 years now. And in that time, seen our department grow from 5 people to the 12 that we currently have. As you can see through some of these statistics that Owen has shown you, we continue to see an increased volume of Plan Commission and BZA or Board of Zoning Appeals petitions granted monthly. Each of these approved projects then funnel into the hands of our permit technician and our 3 building inspectors through permit inquiries and submittals, reviews and issuances, and finally scheduled and performed inspections. The continual increase of our team's daily inspections is represented on the second graphic. Nope, it's actually the next one. Sorry, the third one. With the onset of COVID, followed by the mass material shortages and delays, we saw a new area of service for our permits and inspections team surface, which was through the issuance of permit extensions and required approval of finished permits to complete projects that weren't getting completed within the 12 to 18 month build out that we typically have been seeing. So as you can see, the demand of our services is high and we have to meet statutory deadlines. The services provided our building team is one that is governed by our zoning ordinance, which mandates that the permit submittals must be reviewed within 5 or 15 business days after the submittal date. While this provides a high level of customer service than most jurisdictions provide, it also means that we are required to continue the workload of permit reviews, issuances, inspections, even when our team members are on leave. Our permit technician coordinates the work that the 3 building inspectors who review permits and perform the inspections provide, a service that's unique to Zionsville. When she's away, other team members, including myself, take over those duties for her to keep the department moving forward. This is the same when a building inspector's away, generally creating a continuous cycle of accrued comp time when our team is out for an extended period. The addition of a second permit technician and a 4th building inspector would allow our team to continue the level of service our customers have come to expect and we strive to offer, hopefully without disrupting the workflow of others. Additionally, this would provide support when our team are called away from the office to attend continuing education, obtain and maintain required certifications, or take leave, as well as provide a healthy work environment and work-life balance. We hope to welcome these additional staff members to support our team in working with residents and development teams to assist them throughout their journey. We appreciate your time, and if there's any questions, let us know.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here tonight, and I'd like to kick off the discussion of the Department of Public Works 2023 budget request with some simpler funds and some accounting changes. You'll notice in the screen now there is a 2022 adopted column that has a bunch of zeros. That is because previously facilities management had been assigned to a non-departmental status. Because facilities management is within the Department of Public Works, those expenses are now going to be categorized as public works. So this is not $528,000 in new requests. This is a shifting of a portion of these funds. That being said, the personal services in this particular slide does represent one new position that we are seeking in facilities management, about which I will speak here in further detail in a moment. Then in supplies, the $7,500 is what we need to keep on hand at town hall to keep things functioning. But service and charges is a larger number. So let's talk a little bit about what services and charges encompass. There are basically two parts to that fund line. One is a big change, much like facilities management being placed under Department of Public Works. So are the utility bills going to be classified as DPW expenses. These are the electric bills, our gas bills, our water bills, everything that you might pay in your home, the town also pays. And that's not just in the buildings, that's in the streetlights the town owns, traffic signals. So all of the utility expenses are going to be assigned to DPW. So of that large $393,000 sum number, $272,650 are our utility bills. So the balance of that, $121,150, are the contractual services and building repair and maintenance costs necessary to keep this building safe, operational, and functional. Whether that's the fire monitoring system, the elevator inspection, HVAC, you name it, those are building costs. So that I'm happy to have that in further detail if you would like to have it. The next is pretty self-explanatory. That's our loan payments on the 2018 GO bonds to pay for the project of the Zionsville Road expansion and the Marysville Road project with its two roundabouts. So that's just our loan payment. And the local road and street is revenue from the state. A portion of the gas tax collected is distributed by population, and that has remained a consistent $500,000 in past years. Here we get into the meat and potatoes, the backbone motor vehicle highway fund. This is another distribution of state gas taxes plus any allocation for property taxes that you choose to prop up this department. You can see the top half of this graph. There's a modest increase of 300,000, and that is nearly entirely in personal services. This includes the bonuses and things that have previously mentioned, plus two new positions in the street division, about which I will talk here in a moment. The bottom half of the graph you see is a slight reduction in expenses as we've taken a good hard look at where we can cut spending and where we can also anticipate less needs in the future. So frankly, for all intents and purposes, that is flatlined as well. Wrapping up some of our funds, we do have the motor vehicle highway restricted fund, and that is a portion of the gas tax that must be carved out, that cannot be used for operations, equipment, personnel, anything. It must only go to street repair. And lastly, CCD. There's a modest increase in CCD from 58,000 to 2.3 million. Come on, that's got to be a little bit of a chuckle, right? Okay, all right. 58,000 of that pays for certain vehicle leases, but the rest of that are all new capital and equipment requests of you, and I am going to enumerate those shortly. Next slide, please. Pathways is the word of the day for 2023. It's what we hear a lot about from the public, and I think it's what most people are clamoring for. Not to go into too much detail, but in next year, we believe, based on our internal design work and layout, we could bring 4 pathway projects to construction. Now, typically, it's a multi-year project, multi-year timeline to bring these construction projects to fruition. But these pathway projects are relatively simple. They don't require any new right-of-way, and they are filling in gaps. On the left side, you'll see we're up in the Mulberry Fields area. So we're also there at the Zionsville Middle School and Zionsville High School, on screen to the right, all geared towards connectivity to the 2 schools in the area. On the right side of the screen, we were up near Heritage Trail Park and the new Trailside Elementary School. Again, new redistricting, different subdivisions trying to get to schools. And of course, this also puts us in the area of the athletic complex, which is receiving a lot of users these days. So again, pathway projects that could be brought to construction and completed in 2023 should we choose to fund them. While we don't just want to stop at building things, we always want to keep things in the hopper, projects for future consideration. We put a lot of effort in-house this year on doing some survey work and some preliminary line work on a pathway corridor project, which basically connects the existing pathways at St. Al's, which connect to Zionsville westward towards Whitestown. And currently there are pathways at Blackstone subdivision. So it's a couple mile link, but it is an important link. What we're requesting is $75,000 to fund what we're calling a corridor study. We must keep in mind that this road is planned for expansion at some point in the future. It is not on our radar now, but we need to identify those segments of this pathway project that would be designed to be understood to be lost to a future project and what would be designed to be permanent, not understanding the full scope of a future road project. Kind of in a more traditional design bid build scenario are two other pathway segments. On the left side of your screen, those two blue blobs represent the ponds at Cobblestone Lakes. We want to begin preliminary engineering and design work to extend that pathway westward. And again, on the right side of your screen, we're back up at Heritage Trail Park, again, trying to connect Rock Bridge and some of the outer line subdivisions, as well as the Devonshire subdivision under construction, down to the schools they will attend, as well as parks and the athletic complex. These pathways will require outsourced design ultimately, which is what the request is for 2023, to hire a consultant to design these. And these will also likely have land acquisition needs. We will have to acquire land from property owners or easement rights in the future. So this is more of a 3-year, the beginning of a 3-year project development phase. Moving on to staffing, or moving back to staffing, since I already brought it up. We don't have a real great metric on how many people is enough, what's too much. So what we've always done is compare our field staff in the street division to how many road miles they maintain, that they plow, that they salt, as well as to our customer base. And we got that customer base from our residential trash customers. So it's a pretty accurate representation of family household. So why do we use those as our basis for comparison? Well, of course, we're salting, plowing, maintaining, filling potholes on the number of road miles we have, but then these households, we're also providing those seasonal services such as brush and limb, leaves, heavy trash. We're visiting all these households multiple times a year to provide our services. You can see then just kind of a representation. We've added one person in this division, and we went back to 2014, which was the furthest back. Thank you, and I hope you all have a good, oh. Nope, we're back. It's not that easy. We've grown staff by one person, going back to 2014, which is an 11%, 9 to 10 increase, while other demands have increased 24 and 37%. So while if you choose to fund these two positions next year, it does not bring us back to our previous 2014 staff to metric levels, it certainly gets us close. I'm going to just say that I could go on at length on each one of these, and probably some of you may recognize the backhoe. It has been before you at least 2 more years as we continue to spend about $30,000 a year to keep our backhoe in operation. I'm happy to have any conversations with anyone on the needs and justifications, but just know that this is already a pared down list. The first list from my department was quite lengthy. We sat down and took a good hard look, and this list is what we feel is absolutely critical and necessary to continue our levels of service and productivity. To round out the capital discussion, we have kind of 3 unique initiatives. One is a new salt barn on our County Road 875 East campus. So our current salt barn was built around 2005 when our annual consumption was about 300 to 350 tons of salt a year. In recent seasons, we push 1,500 to 1,600. We are 5 times more salt than when the salt barn was built. That salt barn has a capacity, if you leave the doors open and don't mind it spilling out a little bit, we can get about 450 tons. So we can't even get a third of our season's capacity into a barn. And that is very important because as we're all experiencing these supply chain issues, availability of material, drivers, transporters, every season, I am more and more scared that I'm going to have to say to you at one point, we have a storm coming and we can't do anything about it. We propose to build this salt barn out on our 875 campus in a location that has already been identified through a development plan process as the optimal location. And it is not a fancy building. It's an FBI building, but our goal is to get 1.5 to 2 seasons worth of salt storage capacity. That way, when we do have a light winter, we don't have to order as much the next year. Right now, we just kind of reset and have to order that 13, 14, 1,500 tons each year and hope that the weather matches our demand forecast. Downtown planters, we currently have 20 large flower pot planters downtown in the landscape islands, and we have opportunity for 15 more. I think these have been well received by the folks downtown that we've talked about. The nice thing about these is they're for season. Most landscaping efforts go dormant in the winter. Each fall, these are cleaned out. Winter displays are placed in these. So we'd like to continue that investment in the downtown by supplementing the planters that we already have. Lastly, for the last 18 months or so, the Community and Economic Development Department engaged in a wayfinding signage development. It was a very public process, took a lot of input. And what resulted from that was their recommendation of a sign theme, almost a branding theme. But approximately 60 locations were identified along roadways, which would fall under DPW's purview, that are directed towards drivers to guide people through and around Zionsville. That 189,200 is these 60 locations, and we would like to start implementing this plan that I believe, and I think we all believe, receive good community support. Lastly, we have an initiative and an effort that the mayor alluded to earlier in her comments. And although this slide is labeled non-departmental, I kind of prefer the term pan-departmental because it is so broad in scope and range. We have a fire department. Congratulations on that wonderful, wonderful news that now is growing quickly. But we have a fire department that has identified at least one building as operationally deficient, and I believe is seeking funding this year for a 20-year strategic planning effort in 2023. We have an internal strategic plan created by our police department outlining the importance of planning future facilities and specifically noting the consideration of a public safety facility and co-location options. And some of you have heard of the operational space needs for streets and stormwater, as well as parks and recreation. Their needs some 3 years ago when we brought to some of you a presentation on a design layout of the County Road 875 campus. So we have multiple existing active remote operation locations. We have multiple independent strategic planning efforts, and we have a land bank of unimproved, partially developed sites already owned by the town, ripe for opportunity. I've talked with both chiefs. Yeah, I sat between them, so they couldn't call me a liar. And it seems we all concur that we should stitch these efforts together into a cohesive long-range strategic operations plan. It is necessary to conduct a comprehensive plan to identify the highest and best uses of all current properties and locations. As our community grows, we must have what we need, where we need it, when we need it. This consultant and staff-led effort will also prioritize these projects for fiscal planning and budgeting outlooks. Considering that it can take 3 years from conception to occupying a new building, given the many needs across these 4 departments in a rapidly growing community, we could be looking at a 20-year horizon for full implementation and development. Thus, without a cohesive and unified evaluation and growth plan, we're really just shooting in the dark and not making informed decisions. That's a $150,000 request in CCD. To do this comprehensive study across 4 departments and evaluate all the sites we have available at our disposal. Thank you. And I'm happy to entertain any questions now or defer to questions later or pass the microphone off. Actually, it was the last one I preferred.
I just have another question for, and it may be Joe, and I appreciate that what y'all are sharing, and I know in the previous initial budget, that everybody needs more personnel. That was that theme. Happy to help, move the marble on that. You mentioned the 4%, and I guess the question I have, Joe, last year we did a comprehensive salary study. It came up with midpoints and we put some money towards getting folks there. I don't remember if that bump we funded was to get every employee to the midpoint. I don't remember. The question I have is if we haven't, investing in personnel is important, but we're also, with 4%, that's nice for cost of living, but that's not moving us towards study to get people to midpoint. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sorry if I missed the mic.
Answer your first question, the extra appropriation that was requested 18 months ago was to get people to minimum, not midpoint. There was a request to be included in the budget to bring people to midpoint. We did not make the final cut of the budget. I agree that 4% is, I agree, 7% is where we need to be to make up for the low increase in 2021. And then I think the bonus is a great way to address inflation because we're at 8.6%, I think, inflation October or August to August, and we won't always be there. So I think bonuses are a great way to address that instead of but
well, I mean, I think it's
it
important to try to get to the midpoint, right?
Sure.
Moving towards it. And this may be a sidebar, but at some point, I'd like to see what the difference is. To get, what would it cost us? What would it cost to get everybody?
about 380,000 salary only.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I'm just trying to weigh in my mind that we all do who manage large organizations, staffing up, but also making sure we're all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wasn't kind of on the same line. One of the things
based on performance. We had several people earlier in the year that were just woefully low in the scale, and were able to make a small increase for those folks. But it's another 380,000 in salary only to bring the entire back to.
but that's not the less than
I'm not sure if I understand exactly.
have any department that's made
Public safety has requested to bring their estimate. That was consideration. Idea was to, instead of having individual departments do that only, have the entire organization together.
my question of public safety. requested.
Yes, yeah, the decision is how do we look at the whole organization and come up with our increases, our raises, our bonuses, the whole organization.
I thought that was one of the things. That's how it was told to us, that we. Flexibility to make these things.
Jason, wouldn't they have that did it, they wouldn't have to have money in the budget to do it. We've been told all year long. we've got funding now.
It has to get appropriated, not appropriated balances. It has to come to you all for an appropriation.
But it doesn't come to us. It's not every department. Certainly something we would.
I don't like the bonus. First of all, that would be a 2022 against the 2020. But in addition, inflation is not going to go away. It's not like in a year it's going to deflate. That the police are missing out if you're raising their base by more than 4%. It hurts them 5 years down the line. They are going to have a base salary that's up 4% for state and it starts having. So we're asking, the mayor's asking, for $1.7 billion. Talk to capital or operation. Important is I see turnover in that we take adding resources. 4% is not enough. I would like to take that 3.8, put it on top of it, figure out how to make that work. I also works. That deal with us now. How the department heads are there, that within overall budget, they're flexible. Want it to be sustainable, and I feel capital ask separate subjects. So we're talking with 8.7. I don't want to have that as an assigned budget because if you need a fire truck now, you need to get going now on pathways. You need something on parks. I'd rather just talk about it now. If you back all that out, see more additional rate. How we do that, so it's focus on people. That's I think we owe it.
I agree with you 100%. And that's what we've been going through is how do we make these increases, looking at increasing the salaries of the staff we have today and also bringing on the staff that our department has budgeted for. It has to be sustainable. It has to be something that year after year. I think that's what we're trying to share with you is that that's not an easy calculation given the relatively low increase in an annualized budget. It could be
No.
lower, actually.
No, those were the numbers as it relates to the revenue that we would anticipate receiving based on certified or the estimated lit values that have been provided by the state. Now, I will say, as it relates to the 2022 numbers, you also have to take into account that we are anticipating fund balances growing during 2020. So to state that you had a budget imbalance for 2022 is incorrect. Part of that is due to, one, actuals to what was estimated. The actual impact of circuit breaker is down in 2022 from what was estimated in the budget process. Additionally, you received a supplemental lit distribution. One of, I believe, 85 counties in the state that received a supplemental lit distribution. I'm trying to bring it up right now. That's correct. So the state, in calculating your local income tax distribution and your estimates for what they certify in subsequent years, they're required by statute to maintain a fund balance to guard against decreases in local income tax revenues. If collections exceed what is in that balance, then that is then distributed the following May in a supplemental local income tax distribution. So you received nearly $1 million in local income tax across the board in general, MVH, and police. And in public safety lit, you received just over 500,000. So it was over $1.5 million that the town received in a supplemental distribution in late May, driving up those revenues, which is, as a result, driving up the cash balances in each of those funds from what was originally appropriated and budgeted to what is available to spend. Your property tax levies, it will have no impact short term on those levies. Longer term, it could have impact on how much your levy can grow. So your levy growth quotient is calculated by the state, which is based upon the previous 5 years of your non-farm income growth in the state of Indiana. So that is one value across all 92 counties. This year, that number is larger than it's been in recent years. It's 5%. We would anticipate, based on the growth of local income tax dollars, which gives us an indication that as well there is a growth in non-farm income as well, that those numbers would continue to grow in subsequent years. I can't guarantee that because that number is calculated each year and distributed to the local units of government around June of each year. But given the severe growth that we've seen in local income tax dollars and what is sustaining the state's budget is the growth in personal income tax dollars, that we would expect those increases to continue from that perspective, at least to date. As it relates to your assessed values, your levy is your levy. The assessed value really has to do with what the tax rate will be for the taxpayer. And then if the tax rate, if assessed values drop and rates increase, what impact that would have on collection of taxes as a result of circuit breaker impact. But Zionsville has a very small circuit breaker impact today, and traditionally has had a small circuit breaker. Your levy growth, yes, is capped at 5%, but that is just a function of your total revenue. Your total revenue is based on your local income tax dollars, as well as then on any other miscellaneous income, fee income, or any other miscellaneous income.
Councilor Troy, is your mic operational? Yeah.
People aren't as loud as me.
So if, going full circle, if a bonus costs 500K for 3.8%, I'm going to assume that's what it would cost to go to a 7.8% raise, and midpoint's 380K. We need to find 880K.
So, and I picked this up because I'm getting messages from people saying it's hard to hear. Just one thought, and I know I'm coming from the private sector world, and things don't necessarily work the same way, but I am not a huge fan of giving everybody just a 7.8% increase. I think on average, they probably deserve 7.8%. But I also think it ought to be based on performance. And I know we tend to go flat raises across the board. I'm a bigger fan of performance-based raises. So I think you can get the people that deserve to be at the midpoint to the midpoint. But if you've got somebody that's just doing enough to get by, they maybe don't deserve a 7.8% increase. So maybe that gets us that, cuts out that $80,000 deficit you're talking about.
We headed down that path January of last year, had every intention of instituting performance evaluations tied to compensation. Found as we were developing those and talking to staff, the things that you probably do at your organization and have regular one-on-ones, documenting performance, goals, all those kind of things, varied dramatically from department to department. This organization was not ready to do a performance-based raises. We have started down that path and putting the framework in, and I think we can get there. We won't be there this year. Just my 2 cents on that.
Joe, let me ask this. I mean, I think the concern is obviously taking care of our staff, but as at least what I'm seeing, hiring right now, as folks do leave, to attract talent in a very thin pool, we're having to struggle paying more anyway to get the talent that we want. So even if you don't pay it now and someone leaves, you're going to have to pay it to fill the position with the talent that you want. So I don't know if our turnover rate, and you may know this off the top of your head or not, for 2022, are we running? I mean, is the turnover higher than it has been traditionally? Because folks can leave to go to other positions now because it becomes a job seekers market across the board. That's why we're seeing so much.
We have had turnover. It's not runaway turnover. It is, we had, I think, 6 people leave within 30 days. And so it feels like a lot sometimes. And especially when that's focused in one department over another department, it is not statistically huge. But to your point, we were just having this conversation in HR today that, somebody leaves and they've worked years and years and years to get to $60,000. We're going to have to pay $60,000 to get anybody to come in and get close to what that person is doing. So I think it is important to get people up to midpoint. Like I said, I believe that we have we can transition to performance evaluations tied to compensation. Those are all things that we can work on.
Yeah, and I know these are hard decisions to get to. I guess I'm just pointing out for me as I look at the budgets and what's being proposed, to me, that seems like a critical need and particularly given to your point, the turnover and replacing staff that you're gonna have to end up paying anyway.
I agree.
You know, maybe that's a decision that we have to look at and say that should be a higher priority. Just putting out from my perspective as I look through it, it's not just a budget issue, it becomes an efficiency issue for the departments to be able to maintain as people are, you know, deciding to turning over. That hurts the town to lose staff who've been here for 10, 15 years.
So how do we get there, right? HR is saying that's the right way to go. Mayor is saying that's a good idea. Council is saying that's a good idea. We need to find 800K. How do we do that? Do we do it right now? Like, I'm not gonna pick on a department and say, you don't get X, because that might be important to them. And then I don't know enough to say no, but we're all in agreement. What's the next step?
So, and when you say you don't get X, we're talking about operational expenditures, not capital expenditures.
Preferably, again, going to sustainability that we all seem to agree is important.
Could we take the proposed bonus pool and just add that in, you know, and I know it would be recurring, but add that in to the 4%, and that wouldn't get us to the 7.8%, I don't think,
No.
or that, but it gets us closer.
That's what we've been trying to cobble together.
Okay.
Is that recurring component and then the one-time component so that it gets us closer to the numbers that we're talking about right now.
And I really appreciate hearing that we're on the path to get into a performance-based raise process. That's in my mind long overdue. Thank you. Lance hasn't finished up. We got sidetracked, sorry.
Well, where are we on this? Like,
I'm sorry, on this what?
on the pay thing we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes, we all just sort of shook our heads. Yes, great. What's the action item here? Who owns this? Does council own this? Do you want me to go in and find the money? Mayor, do you want to find the money?
We're good. I think we're just presenting to you the budget, and if you want to move on, you know, on raises for staff sooner than later and bonuses, we can add that to our.
We're keeping track of what your suggestions, recommendations are. We can put those into the model, bring it back to you, and let you know what that impact is.
Yeah, I just don't want to get to a point where like we filed forms with the government, like, yeah, it's a great idea, but sorry, we now can't do it because those buckets aren't available. So if that, I'm fine if that's the next step. Great. I also personally, I can't speak for these four gentlemen. I don't want to raise for council. Like there's a built-in raise, I believe, in the council's budget, but I'm fine where I'm at. So you can leave that as is. And I do have in the mayor's budget, it shows her with a flat salary, but her workers' comp is up 15 times. What's up with that?
That's a good question.
She owes a flat salary,
Oh,
longevity pay.
Be on the desk.
Their FICA's up $2,000 and workers' comp goes from $170 to $2,000.
2023 workers' compensation numbers we got from our agent and, or the rates we got from our agent. Nobody is, I will say, I am not sure where the ones came from last year. We did not provide that to accounting last year, so I'm not certain where those budget numbers came from.
But
last
like the
year.
communications budget, their workers' comp for budget 2023 is like $187. Is your salary flat or did someone transpose a number? Because I can't figure out why FICA's gone through the roof and why workers' comp's gone through the roof on the budget stuff you sent over today.
That I sent over today.
Not you, I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
Kelly. I'm sorry,
Is
not
it
you, Joe.
just, is it just in the mayor's? And so what you're suggesting is you're not seeing it across the board?
I'm not seeing it across the board. That's the weird thing. I think there's an error in
It
there.
could be an error. We'll double check.
Uh,
Thank you.
Okay. And then and you're maybe going to get to this when you're done, but I'm curious about how the fire grant we announced today impacts all this.
Yep,
So I'll let you get to that.
It's more fun. More fun coming.
So where were we?
I think we're handing it off.
Doesn't seem to be working.
That was your third option, was to no question.
It is on. Okay. In pivoting between my notes and the screen, I had overlooked and undersold a request we have, which is for an additional person in our facilities management division. We currently have a single staff member maintaining buildings at Town Hall, Municipal Service Building, wastewater treatment plant offices, 4 fire stations, our 875 facility, and even the golf course clubhouse. We need to get this gentleman, Bobby Adams, some assistance. He frequently works in environments that a partner would provide additional safety. He works in higher danger situations. And of course, when he's gone, there is no one to mind the store. This isn't shifting a workload. There just is nothing. I usually end up changing toilet paper rolls and stuff. Not that I'm against that, but I would be underselling this particular facilities manager by not underscoring the importance to get him some support as a single person charged with so many duties. Now I will pass to Kelly.
Thank you. All right. So our budget request, part of what is in the 2023 budget request is you approved additional appropriation, I believe in the last council meeting for to hire an additional accountant specialist position. So that is not, that extra money is not, does not show up in this slide as far as what was adopted in 2022. So it does make our salary, it does make it look like pretty much a larger request than maybe it. I mean, that is a request, but it's not taking into account the position that we just have filled. So the additional money for the salary, that would be for a procurement person. So I'm looking for a procurement director. I would hope to have them be over procurement for the town and also over fleet. Just have to centralize that, and we'll centralize that into the accounting department. I worked a lot with procurement in my previous position. I'm excited to bring it to the town. A lot of the rules are very similar from the state to a municipality, so that'll translate very well. And we're looking forward to centralizing that position. And that's the only, besides the accounting specialist position, that is the only other position that I am asking for in the budget. The only other things that are additional, just kind of, we've always asked traditionally under for what we need for our subscriptions and our dues and our memberships. And so we're just right siding that in our budget this year. That is all. The software. I apologize. So we also have under my purviews that the direct assistants. So we've decided the employee who was in this position, was a part-time position. She did a great job. She's found a full-time position, and so she has just left employment with us this week. So we are taking that position and kind of distributing it around in finance. And the MAC is being very has been wonderful with helping us as well. So we will not have that salary coming up in the 2023 budget. But what we would like to do, there is an increase in the software. There's a municipal software you can get. It's not very expensive, and we'll be able to put all the applicants' information in there. It'll just be kind of a safer place to put all their information, so we don't have everything on paper. And we'll be able to look up those files. It'll just streamline the process a lot more for the people in our town that need assistance.
Yeah, I mean, again, looking for personnel, I totally get it. I support each of them one by one. When you add them up, we're going to hear 19 new staff positions across the board, not counting some that we've added now that'll be kicking in. I haven't seen the dollar amount attached to 19, but even just using 100K, I mean, you're at about $2 million in new budgeted dollars just to pay for staff. And again, I'm not opposed to any of it. I'm just saying we keep hearing it, and I'm like, man, this is just gonna add up at the end of the day. A couple $1 million, I'm assuming, right, Joe? Or as a guesstimate as.
Yes. I think in my position, not to anybody else's position, and I have said if there is a cut to be made, I would certainly be one of the first to take that cut. I certainly don't want to take anything away from public works or fire, public safety, public works, anyone else. I do think that the position I'm asking for, and I have it, I wanted to have it for you tonight and I don't, but I really do think there be a cost savings with bringing someone onto this position. And I'm happy to try to run some of those numbers to get for you. I just don't have anything with me tonight, but between fleet and between just trying to centralize all of our purchasing, I think there should be a cost savings. It's kind of hard to quantify, but I'm hoping it'll be kind of a zero sum
Yeah,
position.
and many, and you're not probably not the only position that could be a net gain, right, in terms of revenue, because there are other, I mean, even your department could be more staff, could actually increase more revenue.
Counselor, I do agree with you. I think that there are going to be some situations where we look at all of this and say, we're not going to be able to fund everything that the folks are putting forward. But we are trying to share with you all the full picture of what the department heads are looking for. I believe that is something you all have asked repeatedly, and we've wanted to listen and respond to that. So yes, there are going to be places where we'll just ultimately have to figure out how we're going to get by without the requested funding, because it's not enough to go, fully around the table. But I appreciate you all asking these questions and helping us talk through how we prioritize ultimately where we put the funds that we do have available.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of reacting to the data like anybody would.
Kelly, and I appreciate that, Mayor. I appreciate this dialogue. Kelly, you have salaries going up 43%, assuming you get these two positions, but the health insurance is up 131%, and other departments, the health insurance is effectively flat, which I credit Joe for that. What gives there?
I was looking. I was looking at that tonight, and when I do the math, I base that off of to go off the highest rate. And I know the person that we have taken on, who will especially start on Monday, who was a temporary employee, will be at the highest rate. I believe I'm at the highest rate. I guess I shouldn't divulge it. Whoever's at the highest rate, we need to divulge. But I based those numbers off of that. And I don't think that, and I think we're gonna have to come back for an additional appropriation, because I don't believe that those are numbers from last year or where we're gonna end up.
And just to point out, we are talking about roughly, I like your analogy there of if it's 100,000, you're talking about 2 million. We are seeing almost 3 million in additional revenue. So that does offset that plus some. I know we've got other expenses besides salaries, but just so we understand, there is additional revenue. It's not just more expense off the same revenue. And I know you're going to look into this, but I did notice that the finance department, similar on the workers' comp. Did we, because it went from 425 to $5,543. So there's something not right there. I don't know if and you said you didn't know where the last year's numbers came from. So I guess the question is, were we way under budgeted last year and spent way over, or is the number maybe not right in the system, maybe a decimal points off or something?
Something's wrong with it.
Okay. All right. I won't keep beating that dead horse, but just the fact that we saw it in two different places kind of solidifies that there's probably something wrong there. Thank you. Man, thanks for your mic. You won't share.
Might be a good thing. So human resources, our operating budget is flat, neutral as well. The number one priority for 2023 for us is improving employee satisfaction and retention. We want to focus on culture, salary, benefits. Some of the things that we're going to work on is really investing in our greatest asset, which is our employees, upskilling and growth and development, succession planning, and then training and development for our people leaders. We've talked a lot about retention and recruiting. I was at a workshop and they were talking about nobody's coming. And nobody's coming means that we don't have this massive wave of baby boomers that's going to come and fill all these positions when some of the younger generation are leaving to do whatever, not traditional jobs. Some of the older generation is saying, I'm done, I'm not staying till 65. And so there's not this big wave. So we really need to focus on career ladders, upskilling our employees to be ready to fill those positions, because most of the leadership positions around this table, 5-7 years, and most of them are out. So we really need to be filling from within and making a conscious effort to do that. Some of you will be longer than 5 to 7 years.
Could be 20. I mean.
I'm saying right now, I'm not in for 20. A lot of these initiatives, I don't know if you know this, but we have I want to take the opportunity to tell you, we have a peer wellness and engagement committee that is made up of individuals from each department, and they are representing their department in these meetings. And so a lot of these initiatives are taken on by employees, for employees. And I think that's a really cool thing that's developed over the last couple of years. Longevity pay. Sounds like everybody's for it, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
It is it is something that we really need in this ultra competitive market, especially for public safety. Why it's important for public safety, in case you did not know, it goes to the pension base, and that's what their pensions are based on, forever, on and on and on and on and on. So if we can do that for them, especially, that it would make a huge impact. If we do not do it, town of Zionsville will be the only folks in Boone County that do not have longevity pay in 2023.
And Joe, I'm going to ask a question I think I already know the answer to,
Sure.
but by increasing public safety's pension base, it's not like we are putting a long-term liability on Zionsville's books, because all of that's paid through PERF.
Yeah.
Correct. And so it's beneficial to our people without saddling us with, you hear about long-term pension
Correct.
obligations that public sector has.
Correct. We pay in as long as, correct me if I'm wrong,
It's a great
we
question.
pay in as long as they are employees, and then it's,
It's a great point, and also illustrates that that's why a bonus program isn't helping. in
isn't
that
as
particular
impactful for
Exactly.
some.
I want to understand the longevity pay a little better. So I'm seeing the graph here, and this, just so people know, I'm not ill prepared. This is just the first time I've seen this, but so it's showing 1 to 10 years is $200 per year. So that, all right, I'm following now. So if you're 3 years, it's $600. All right, I understand. I kind of had to talk myself through it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Glad to help.
Good question
And-
too, though, because otherwise it's pretty small.
And then, then there's not, you have to be here at least 3 years, finish your 3rd year to be able to receive anything,
Thank you.
the current plan.
But there is a max too. Yeah, Brian.
55.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thanks for being patient with all of the technical stuff. We're running out of room for the first time like this, so it's a little bit of a challenge. We're bringing you for IT department fairly flat budget. Personnel going up a little bit just from the normal 4% raises that you're seeing there. Supplies staying about the same. We're doing pretty well funding everything that we need to do with the current budget numbers. Services and charges, that's going to be all of our contractual services. It's going to be things like our telephone service and our cell phones, things of that sort that we have to pay in our software licensing, which is a big part of that. Capital outlays is fairly small. There's a good amount of that in the supplies area there as well. So that's going to be used for things like servers and phones and hard tangible items for our department. We're really pushing towards a security year. We went through a process earlier in the year for a kind of an overview and a look kind of down deep into the department and what we're doing and the equipment that we have. That came up with a nice list of things that we should address to help get us more secure and more up to date. We're starting that process currently with a vendor who's assisting us. The event monitoring and network security is going to be a big, huge improvement for us. Have somebody third party that can watch us 24/7 and kind of have our back. It's not a small process. It's actually a pretty involved thing. So that's going to be a big project for us. We're currently running phase 1 of the Mulberry Fields, installing cameras. We're going to go for phase 2 next year to try and finish it out. Another fairly big project with our security vendor. And then looking at, again, security, having the rail trail improvements, looking at the bridges and underground areas to be able to have access to cameras. So if there's anybody doing anything they shouldn't, we'll have recordings of that. So do you have any questions?
Joe, as you look at the previous departments and they've had, requesting lots of new positions, I was sort of surprised that software licensing, telephone and mobile is flat. Are you able to handle the increase of employees, whatever account we land on with this current budget?
We're having those discussions.
Okay.
That hasn't been lost on us, so we'll figure that out.
As Jared gets started, the one thing that I failed to mention earlier was the fact that the mayor heard your concerns and your desires. And in the current version of the budget, they have pulled out parks and fire into separate levies, as was previous prior to 2020. So that is reflected in the current budget. It does cause for some unique looking numbers as you go through each of those lines and pages, because as you compare 22 to 23's appropriation request, but it is all accounted for separately.
No surprise that Zionsville continues to grow. This is a place people want to live with our exceptional schools, our safe community, and the quality of life that residents enjoy today and expect as they move into the area. So we are trying to keep up with that growth and have been for some time as our park system continues to expand. We are in a year right now where we are contacting our community and asking for their input in the next 5 years. So as we roll into the 2023 budget, we are keeping in mind that our next 5 years are going to be paved for us with the study that'll come out at the end of this year. So with that in mind, we have plenty of capital projects on the books actively wrapping up over the next year. So we wanted to focus on our operations as we attempt to meet that demand and expectation of Zionsville Parks in our community. So as we look at this, the largest change is to the personnel line, and that is not only to incorporate those 4% increases, but also to add additional funds to our part-time line. Currently, we have 6 days of coverage with our full-time staff, and we have approximately 12 hours a week budgeted for part-time staff. We are looking to move up part-time staffing in our maintenance operations up to 56 hours a week. So that is an employee every day of the week. Because as you can imagine, while we're here Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday, our most activity is on Saturday and Sunday. So when a tree falls on Sunday, that's an overtime call. Or when our parks get inundated with birthday celebrations or family gatherings, that's a reputation that we're experiencing with our cans not serviced or bathrooms in disarray. So we're looking to improve that quality of service in the community. Additionally, moving down the line, just trying to keep up with inflation as our supplies get a little larger. The largest ticket change is for fuel. So as we expand personnel, those will be additional vehicles on the road to accommodate for that. And just the added cost of adding 47 acres with Overly Warman and then 1.5 miles in the next year on our Big Four rail trail. So anticipating that. Services and charges remained relatively the same, a minor $1,000 bump there. We will continue to do what we do best, and that is apply for grants, seek out volunteers, and leverage every opportunity we can to meet the expectations of Zionsville. Our capital outlay is the annual allocation of $314,000. So we will have that allocated to begin some of those smaller improvements that come out of the 5-year master plan, as well as continue to purchase new infrastructure for our park system. And our 2019 bonds, which were the Overly Warman bond and the rail trail, that debt service has lowered slightly. So in 2023, we will complete the rail trail northern extension, the trailhead, and begin the widening project with hopes of completing that next year as well. The large majority of that is from the 2019 rail trail bond, as well as the Next Level Trails grant award for 1.8 million. So we had the opportunity to not only extend our trail, but double back and widen it to accommodate the growth we anticipate when Whitestown connects to our trail. Due to popular demand, we have also expedited the development of pickleball courts in our community, and that project has started this year and will continue through 2023 as well. So as I mentioned, we are expanding the park maintenance operations, but we are also looking at using some of those part-time staffing dollars for an internship in our natural resources technician position. So within our maintenance division, we've actually divided that into two specialties now. The park maintenance positions are what focus on the drinking fountains, making sure things are manicured and safe for the community. And our natural resource technician position is beginning to look at our parkland. As stewards of that green space, it is our responsibility to make sure they're healthy and habitable ecosystems. So we continue to invest additional resources in removing invasives, installing restoration projects, and leveraging our volunteer base to continue to make progress in that front. So we'd like to give back and develop an internship, a funded internship position for the summer that would also give back to that applicant as they add that to their resume, but as they serve Zionsville with their short time here. And as I mentioned, we will condense the findings of the capital projects for the 2023 to 2028 Parks Master Plan, prioritize those and begin to check those off the list with our allocations, which will discuss those additional funds outside of the general fund in future meetings. We will also keep up with the high level of recreation and nature-based programming that we have had over 20 years of experience providing for the community. And we will continue on the path towards the Carpenter Nature Preserve. While speaking of the rail trail, I just wanted to make it abundantly clear that our 3.7 miles will become a little over 5 miles next year as we continue past Heritage Trail Park up to the municipal border of Whitestown and Zionsville, as well as the southern extension that opened earlier this year that will feature a trailhead at its southern campus. That is all for parks.
Jared, cemetery care went from 10 grand to 5 grand.
Yes, we've found that we are not utilizing those funds.
Okay. Just had no complaints, I assume. And then there's a new line. It's kind of hard to tell because you got to go from last year's general to this year's parks, but there's a new line item called vehicle repair supplies. Where was that previously? Was that in vehicle maintenance previously to that? I mean, it's not that much money. I was just curious.
Yeah, so it was funded in 2020, not funded in 2021, or sorry, 2021 it was funded, not funded in 2022, and then it's appeared back. So the difference between vehicle repair supplies and vehicle repair and maintenance services versus tires and things we can do in-house.
Thanks.
So can we go back one slide back to the parks? Because to that one. As we look at so in my kind of elementary view of our budget, and President Plunkett and I were talking about it, we were hoping to back out capital outlays as one-time expenditures so that we can determine whether we can continue to finance operationally the town going forward. Now, I'm seeing something here that I have a question about, which is that we have a 2022 capital outlay for the parks as 314, and then a 2023 request is 314. To me, even though that's a capital outlay, it is not a discretionary capital outlay, but rather a recurring. So that I see as it's not an operational item. I understand that, but so when we're trying to figure out how to balance expenses and revenue, it doesn't seem like one question is it doesn't seem like as easy as a prospect to say that we can back out capital outlay and determine recurring expenses. There seems to be other things baked into that, number one. Number two is that as I look through all the Form 1s, I can't get all the capital outlays to add up to more than $8 million.
Yeah, Parks is always the special one. So our rail trail project, as well as Overly Warman, were bonded. So that kind of excludes that. And we are utilizing those funds that are not before you tonight for some of these moving forward. So we have our Fund 103, which was our cash reserves. We have impact fees. We have our programming non-reverting fund. And that 314 you mentioned is the money that's allocated to the parks every year. And should we not use that, goes into our non-reverting capital fund, which is kind of our emergency fund that we've utilized for critical infrastructure.
So how much of, just generally speaking, over the last several years, how much of that 314,000 do you actually utilize each year?
So for last year, the additional appropriation hasn't been before you yet. We're working with Cindy on that, but all but 59,000 was spent last year. So that's what would go towards that non-reverting capital. Historically, I believe there has been more cost savings before I got here, but as I mentioned, we are very much a growing park system right now, and everything is eating into that. So our buildup of savings is getting smaller every year recently.
And just one last question on parks. Does the 2023 request for debt service, that expenditure, take into consideration the bond payments for Carpenter? Should we engage in that?
No, that is strictly the bonds from 2019 at this point.
Oh, that, okay, that's right. Sorry.
Maybe having some of the same questions, hear more about how the sausage is made behind the scenes. So I appreciate this whole venue and approach.
All right, moving on to the fire department. For those watching, James Van Orders, Zionsville Fire Chief. Excited to present to you the budget presented to you today does not include the grant notification that we received in the last 24 hours. We have not had a chance to review that. So this represents what was forwarded from the mayor's office was the addition of 3 firefighters within our 100 series of personnel expenses. Other notable increases in that area, we have proposed to increase our paramedic stipends. Our paramedics receive a stipend on an annual basis, so it does include an increase in that area to be competitive. And then, as we've already talked about, longevity pay is also included in that personnel service line. Within the supply line, some explanation of the increases that are there is really twofold, and that is EMS supplies and fuel. In the last 12 months, we've seen EMS supplies increase nearly 20%. We're still experiencing some supply issues regarding medications, and we only anticipate those costs to go up. The other item for which you'll probably see me before the end of the year, and that is fuel, as the fire department has already spent its entire fuel budget as of 30 days ago. So that represents the most significant increases within our supply category for that 2023 request. Moving on to other services, professional services. Some of those increase requests for 2023 in our medical testing line item is also where we pay for professional services. Next year, we are scheduled to conduct 2 promotion exams, that being for merit captains as well as merit engineers. We are projecting, after speaking with our agent, a 7% cost increase in our property insurance costs. Our vehicle repair line item, we'll talk about some capital items here. We are projecting about a 35% increase in our vehicle maintenance. I guess digging into that a little bit, we have not replaced any apparatus in the past 2 years, so we are falling behind in our equipment replacement program. Also, one of the things that's going to compound that situation is with any approvals that we would receive in this budget and be ready to move forward in January. We've all heard and talked about the supply chain. Municipal fire apparatus that used to be on an 8 to 10 month delivery schedule is now on 24 to 30 months. So over 2 years from after receipt of order are going to be some of those challenges. And that's the reason for that increase in our fleet service expenditures. We're also projecting a 10% increase in some of our building repairs. Other increases in our contractual service line item. We had not allocated in previous years for our third-party ambulance billing service. That's currently with CPROMs, and that's $25,000 a year. We have included also third-party planning services as part of our strategic planning initiative. One of those was for staffing, and we could probably talk about that maybe in the next slide, that may be something now that we could remove from the budget now that we have a $1.6 million opportunity to add 6 firefighters. And then the other one is slightly different than what the program is that Lance mentioned, and this is the resource and facility location plan that the fire department would like to move forward with on a third-party vendor to identify specific fire stations, but not only where those specific fire stations will be over the next 20 years, but also which resources are in those. So not a duplication of effort, but kind of in addition to. That's a brief overview of those increases in the services and charges. There are no increases in the capital outlay contained within our operating budget. The line item you'll see up there, I believe, is the Union Township Fire Station. That's the only fire station that we make payments on. And that was a transition from former Union Township trustee that was built under their structure. And that was a bond issuance that was at that time. That bond issuance does roll off the books in late 2025 as that bond will be paid in full. Moving on to capital outlays. We'll cover that in a different slide, but there's a little over $3.1 million worth of capital expenditures. And then the public safety lit is the personnel expenses for the fire department are split between our fire operating fund and the public safety lit. So those two items get added together. If there's no questions about a brief overview of that, we'll move on to our next slide.
Chief, I think everyone's a little bit curious about the grant. Congratulations, first of all, to everybody who helped with that. I guess I was kind of surprised that it was for personnel, because we have to then sustain that. So is the grant just to get it started, or is that baked in for a period of years to get that? Because 1.6 seems like a lot for 3 people.
Thanks for the introduction in our next slide.
Okay.
Regarding our grant, and as you mentioned, I did like to take a few seconds, and I'd like to acknowledge Assistant Chief Josh Frost, Deputy Chief Mark Hart, Division Chief Jason Potts, and representatives from our labor force that are here from Local 5195. And the fact that addressing the staffing needs of the fire department has been a multi-year approach. So a lot of work has gone into this, led us to consulting with and using an outside vendor for this grant application. The grant application is for the hiring of 6 firefighters. The grant is a unique grant, and they just modified this. It used to be on a reimbursement scale descending over 3 years. It's been changed, and it's 100% payment for what was submitted for 3 years. So it's the salaries over 3 years, and it included, I think we use a general cost increase of 3 to 5% and includes their personnel costs. The one thing that we've identified that is not included here, should we move forward with the grant, and we're supporting that very strongly to move forward. The budget request included 3 of those. So really the ask is to try and encourage the future funding for those other 3 over the next 2 years. But we did not include any fire gear. So if we move forward with the grant, what is the out-of-pocket expense? There's about a $65,000 increase that would need to come back into the budget. But as I just spoke, we would also be able to drop the staffing plan from an outside third party of $55,000. So the net increase of accepting the grant really on the front edge is only the $10,000.
Yeah.
But you are correct. In year 4, the burden or the expense of those 6 individuals is on the entity to maintain employment for those folks. And that does several things for us. We talked about the staffing. It allows us to meet the minimum standards, which you guys have probably heard us talk about, whether you've attended a Fire Ops 101 program from the local, or you've been to our Citizens Academy and you've talked to us about maintaining the safety and effectiveness of our firefighters. So we're really super excited about that. It's very few organizations across the state of Indiana or in the nation receive that opportunity. So we look forward to working with administration, finance, and Crow in trying to make the appropriate budget revisions to move forward with that grant request.
Excellent.
I appreciate that part, Chief. I guess one thing we're really going to have to pay attention to is not for us as this council, but what we're going to ask future administration and councils to do, which is at some point 3 years down the road, expenses again have to meet revenue. And we're going to have to plan for these additional firefighters to drop into the expense bucket at that point. So we're going to have to, plan for, this is the anticipated revenue growth based on, so we'll have to remember that as we look into accepting this grant.
We will.
Thank you. I figured, but
Yeah, no,
you know,
I'm glad
just-
you laid that out perfectly. We do have to do that to make it sustainable.
And our next slide. Moving on with the equipment, capital purchase for the year. It is rather substantial. In fact, it's just short of 3.2 million. But as I had previously stated, in the past 2 years, we have not moved forward with any significant capital purchases. As you recall, the fire department has a very in-depth capital purchase program of trying to move vehicles out of inventory before they become maintenance challenges. So you can see a list of apparatus replacements that are included in the budget presentation before you. We did include the years for the replacement period schedule. Other things I'd call your note to besides fire engine and ambulance, some tankers, is some of the equipment. One of the other important things we're keeping our eye on is that the fire department implemented bulletproof vests for our firefighters several years ago. Those, much like our friends on the law enforcement side, have a life cycle, and all of ours expire in June of next year. So that's a critical path item that we would need to replace, as well as a SCBA compressor. What that is the breathing air system that fills our air bottles. That was originally put in when the fire station was built in 1995. Also, the addition of a tornado siren in the Zionsville area, primarily replacing the siren in the village, which is outdated, and also covers costs to relocate a siren for a better coverage map, is also included in this capital replacement program. And our last slide I share is really what our fire prevention division works through. While this budget does not contemplate any additional staff funding for it, you can see that in 2019, as we implemented a new inspection software, that our numbers for inspections on an annual basis continue to grow. Owen and the great folks in the Department of Planning and Economic Development shared the growth that they're going under. The one thing that's unique about the fire department is that not only do we participate in that original design and construction phase of them coming to Zionsville, but we will forever be inspecting those facilities every single year going forward, which is something different than what planning does for their inspections. You can also see the number of plan and review activity that there is, as well as our inspectable locations go up almost nearly 1,000 locations before the end of the year. And Fire Marshal Ron Lips has identified an analysis from other areas that really that 500 number per inspector is the optimum number to be able to accomplish those tasks. And our organization, the fire department, has not seen an increase since 2017 in the number of inspectors in that area. So that would be something on the horizon that we would need to try and help address. More than happy to answer any questions.
Chief, I have a quick question. So regarding those inspections, is there any way to potentially charge for those inspections? And just a thought, food for thought as we move forward. I don't know what the legality of that is. I know we inspect them in the beginning, and there's a fee that's associated with that. But if we're going to do it every year and it's going to become a cost or a burden, I think we should, just look at that as an opportunity if there is one that exists.
Thank you for that question. I would say that the mayor has also asked that we look at and review our fee schedule for 2023 as well and see where we fall on that. And that can be part of that effort, that we review fees and present recommendations to the board for consideration.
Thank you.
Chief, I have a quick question.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions.
And I know you covered it, but you were going fast and I appreciate that. But you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that we would be able to eliminate the staffing plan. I think you said about $50,000. Is that
55,000.
55?
Yeah.
And that would come, I just want to make sure I'm
Out of
understanding.
300 series.
And
Oh, sorry, personnel and services. Your spreadsheet. doesn't have
yeah,
a
it's
number.
not lined out like that. So it will be contractual services? Is that where it come off of, I think?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, service-
I'm getting the nod from Crow, so yes.
Yeah, I can give you a line item too if you want, but
Thank you.
375.
You had, just real quick, you had, I think it was like the second to the last slide had, right here, $3.1 million. Does that come out of, is any of this coming out of the firefighter equipment replacement fund, or is this coming out of your fund?
It comes out of the equipment replacement fund. And thank you for bringing that up. That's the other important thing about the equipment replacement fund. That's the only thing that those funds can be used for is for the replacement of equipment, whether that be rolling stock, any capital items, and building a fire station. And the reason I mentioned that is you can see there's a need and a desire kind of townwide to look at planning to build these buildings. We also need to make sure we have a mechanism to do that. So it's important that we maintain that 3 1/3 cent worth of revenue that comes into there so that we will be able to fund buildings. I made it a point to talk a little bit about the Union Township Fire Station, but the last fire station, we built Fire Station 93, thanks to Eagle Township prior to government reorganization. So if that fire station was built, we paid cash for it. We only built it because we had the money available. So we didn't even bond anything for that. So it'd be important for us to keep that 3 1/3 cent revenue on that rate for that fund to come in.
And then just two more questions. One is you have historically presented us with a firefighter equipment schedule and plan. Like we've in the past, we've had that presented. Is that something that is available? Do you, I guess I don't like hearing that we haven't done any replacement in the last couple of years and now knowing that we're a year, maybe 2 years out from getting anything if we decide to buy it tomorrow. Is that something that we have available to us or no?
Yes, I can share that plan with you too. It covers every piece of apparatus, inventory equipment that we have.
Okay. And then last question, hopefully. The grant is for 6. I'm sensitive to Councilor Choi's, comments about being able to fund it and the sustainability. I intend to be here in 3 years, so I'm certainly supportive of that. And I know that you've asked in the past for 7 firefighters over the last couple of years, and that's not happened. And I would certainly like to see, for everybody here, I would like to see us make that effort to get this grant funded in the future and get everything done so that we can get the firefighters that we need.
Thank you.
Keep me honest here. Tim, you keep me honest here, because I think it's important for people to know budgeting municipal budgets are funky. We have $2 million in the bank for equipment replacement fund. You get approval to buy that truck for $2 million. You place the order. That $2 million effectively still sits in the equipment replacement fund, but it has been encumbered for that purpose. Where I think Councilor Choi and myself, and I guess the rest of the council find it's important to talk about these capital outlays, because that's something that in a private sector, you would buy it, we would then transfer it as an asset on the balance sheet, depreciate it, expense that over the life of it, and we'd see it in the expenses. In this case, we're going to see it as a 2023 expense fully. It's like 100% depreciated basically, even though we don't have it yet. So I think it's important that we pull them out, maybe the wrong word, but just highlight them. So this council, so we talk about recurring things, but then it's not like we suddenly have a giant deficit. We are just making certain purchases that in a normal world wouldn't show up. You're nodding in agreement. So that
Yes.
all that
Yeah.
makes sense,
Save for
right?
them
Right.
rather than, taking out a mortgage. Or
Yeah.
a loan.
We would actually have to go through that for a 2-year cycle before the vehicle would arrive and we
Right.
would accept it. So yeah, and cash would still be available, and I'll defer to Tim and Kelly as well too. That cash is still there, so that $2 million or whatever.
It's there, but it's not available, right?
But it's available for investment purposes where I was going.
Yes, yeah,
So
okay,
to continue to earn the interest on it, you
Yeah.
have to come up and pay that amount.
If you buy a truck today and getting in 30 months, are you locking in that price?
Interestingly enough, no.
Okay.
That had been the standard practice, and because of the supply chain issues and depending upon which vehicle, there's a lot of things that variables there, is it's not uncommon to be locked into a contract that says that the manufacturer now has the right to pass on any cost increases to you, which is something new and has not been seen. And there's some ways to try and limit that a little bit. But what we're seeing primarily is if you're purchasing a commercial chassis, such as an ambulance, we may be buying a Ford or a Dodge chassis and stuff like that, is the manufacturers are raising the rates, and who build the box in the back can't keep up with that. They can't, before they may see a 2 or 3%, they might be able to just absorb that. But when they're seeing 15, 17% cost increases on their chassis, the new contracts that we're hearing from folks making purchases today is that is directly passed on.
Got it.
I'm guessing then it's a pipe dream to say that contractually it's available for us to say there's a maximum increase amount per year.
There's some limits that can be placed in that language, and we would work with the council, legal counsel, to make sure that those parameters were understood in advance.
Okay.
And it primarily just affects those vehicles that would be using commercial chassis, and those would be the ambulances and tankers. The fire trucks are built from the ground up, all custom. It would not be as impactful.
So Chief, just to clarify what I heard there, in the equipment fund that exists, there's approximately $2 million in a balance that would be ultimately then probably balanced out to zero. I know it sits there, but it's taken care of. How does that fund get reallocated? Where do those dollars come from?
Property taxes at the 3 1/3 cent per $100 of assessed property value comes in on an annual basis. That fund would generate them about $1 million a year. Maybe more
We're
now with
estimating next year, approximately 1.3 million.
with the NAV increases. One of the things that's beneficial is the fund's going to generate more money.
Yeah.
But
And we are anticipating as well, excuse me, Chief, but a balance in that fund after all these expenses are taken into account of approximately $1.5 million at the end of 2023.
Okay.
So that, yeah, and that is in your documents, but so there would still be a balance of approximately 1.5 million.
An unencumbered balance, correct?
Unencumbered, yes, thank you.
That's important enough. Thank you.
That's an important word.
Yeah. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Our first slide presents really what our police department's biggest ask is, and that is personnel. You've heard several up here already talk about the growth of the town of Zionsville, and it has been significant. Numbers I've seen from the census show that there's been a 116% increase in population between 2010 and 2020, and the 2022 estimates show that we're on pace to continue to grow pretty steadily. Our police department has not had an increase in staff since 2018. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this organizational chart so you can see how those positions are situated and where the new officers will be assigned. And those new positions are in red. And as we go across to where it says night shift A, that is a vacancy which was created when Brandon Pounds was assigned to the new Trailside School. So he works now as an SRO in Trailside. And as you go across to school resource officers, we're proposing to add a second officer to the high school. And as you go down that column, you'll see a floater position. So we'll have a total of 7 officers assigned in SRO, and they're all human beings. They all have reasons that they can't always be at work, deaths in the family, doctor's appointments, children's events, and so forth. And so it's important to have an officer who is SRO trained to help supplement that staffing, because we can't ever leave those schools unattended. We've always got to have someone there. So that position will do several things. It will direct traffic around the schools. It will fill in as needed. It will supplement if there are reasons for more police presence. And probably most importantly, the officer will patrol the periphery of our schools and do their best to maintain high levels of visibility and show our presence. Down in the bottom where it says tactical shift, those would be the 2 new officers that would be assigned to town patrol. So I'm challenged with balancing both the needs of the schools and the needs of town patrol. And those assignments to school are absolutely important and absolutely necessary, but they do draw away from our town staffing. So what I'm proposing is that these officers in this, what I call a tactical shift, they would sort of overlap with the day shift and the night shift, and they would be assigned to the hours which are highest in activity and calls for service, those kinds of things. So we have a spike in personnel during those busiest hours. So that's where those 2 new town officers would be assigned, and the total request would be for 5 new positions. Slide. This obviously is the financial information about our budget and requests for these officers. And in personal services, obviously that's salary and benefits. General supplies includes things like fuel, office supplies, uniforms, general services charges. Those are for things like physicals, training, promotional processes, recruiting, travel, telephones, printing, promotions, vehicle repairs, building repairs, contractual services, software, and insurance and subscriptions. Capital outlay includes our vehicle equipment, and there's a great amount of equipment which goes in our vehicles. And I'm proud to tell you that the Zionsville Police Department is extremely progressive and extremely well equipped with the things that we have in our vehicle. All of our officers have body cameras. The vehicles have in-car cameras, and we're able to really use those effectively for training and to help document our work in the field. Capital outlays, well, again, vehicle equipment, firearms, ammunition, SRT equipment, which is essentially our SWAT team equipment and supplies, the CCD supplies, that's body armor. And as the Chief Van Gorder pointed out, that doesn't last forever, and it's got a 5-year expiration period, and we need to replace it regularly when we exceed that 5-year period. In the CCD capital outlays, that includes patrol cars, and the balance of that fund will be used for the new officers' equipment and supplies. Public safety lit, that supplements salaries and FICA. Next slide. I thought it might be helpful to break down what it costs to bring on a new officer. So this slide shows what it costs in the way of equipment. Everything, and again, all these supplies and the vehicle, they're what necessary to bring on a new officer. Obviously, we're not buying new cars every year, we're not buying new guns every year, but there is a one-time cost. Now, the good news is some of those items we have in stock. We don't have enough in stock to provide. Drake shaking his head, no, we don't, to supply all these new officers, and many of these things we will have to buy. But as you can see, it's about $80,000 in equipment to get a new officer going. Slide. And this is what it costs salary-wise. And that salary number, that 71.5, is calculated with the 4% raise. And it's about $135,000 to bring on a new officer. So we appreciate it's a significant expense. It's a significant ask, but we believe it's important and necessary to do those two things I said a minute ago. Maintain the highest level of safety and security in our schools, while at the same time not seeing town patrols diminish. I think that's the last slide. Last slide. Any questions?
Are there grants available like the fire department just got?
We do have we have submitted a request for a grant. What's it, when we think we'll hit something, Drake? End of the month. We'll keep our fingers crossed, but we have a good news, bad news situation in Zionsville. We have a very safe community, and sometimes the decisions to award those grants are based on communities which are experiencing problems. But that's a great question. I forgot to talk about this. The officer we have assigned to the Indiana Gun Crimes Task Force, we're reimbursed for his salary at $70,000 and up to $20,000 in overtime. So it's a great assignment. It does a lot of good for our police department. It brings us a lot of intelligence, a lot of information. And in the unlikely event we have a problem, that officer has a great deal of ability to bring a lot of officers into our town promptly, and a lot of technology and equipment that we can use to investigate these kinds of situations.
And then the 7 SROs in the summer, are they reassigned to patrol typically then, or?
One of our officers is full-time, and the others, yes, they come back. And when you back out their the time they're in the schools, which is about 1,440 hours, and they use their leave time, then they're available to us from about 15 to 20% of the time. So when they come back to us, we try to use them for a couple of different things. One, to increase visibility in the parks and the trails in town, because when children aren't in school or out of school, and we think it's important to have that visibility. And at the same time, sometimes it affords us the ability to let officers who might otherwise not be able to get off for leave time in the summer to do so, and it supplements that staffing.
So adding SROs in a way does add to patrol strength overall.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is really terrific.
I don't know, who's closing it out.
I know, I'm not sure
Well,
either.
Yeah, I think,
Jason, you want to close it out?
I was just gonna say, I think, yeah. Well, and then I've got just, in looking at, a couple of things, Tim, Kelly, Mayor, whoever's gonna be able to help us work through this. We do need to increase, the council budget by probably about $75,000. And this is going to be for additional legal expenses that our attorney is responsible for, that's outside of the frameworks of her retainer. That's typically reactive to other things that are coming her way. So we'd like to have that. And I think by way of our budget, that's probably about all I see, unless there's anything that counselors would add to it.
Well, we talked about Z-Works, but we can maybe figure out that. Okay.
Yeah, I think it would also be good to know, and with the ARPA meeting coming up, like, it'd be good to know how much of this budget capital expenses or infrastructure expenses can be used with ARPA dollars. So I know that it seems somewhat loose, but there are some restrictions at the same time, right, on how we can use it. And Lance, I don't know how much of the pathways can be funded with that. And then how that impacts, we talk about the sustainability of increasing potentially salaries as opposed to the bonuses. I don't know how that impacts these different departments, but maybe Heather, maybe that's something we can just make a note of for the meeting in October. Or I shouldn't say that, like before, so we can see how much of this, if any. I know we'll have to put together the ARPA plan to do it, but it would be good to know how that could impact the budget. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
That's all I got for now.
All right, I got a few things. Let's see. I had a question about things maybe I didn't see in there that I was thinking I would. I know that there's been talk of redoing the town strategic master plan. I'm probably misstating that.
Comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan. There we go. Is that in here somewhere, like the cost for that, or is that?
So we have dollars approved for this year's budget, and Owen just released an RFP that's available. So we have we should have dollars to get that started this year. And then we do have contractual services or professional services dollars in the CED department if we need to shore that up for next year. We hope to get that started this year. We have a little bit longer since we were without a director for many months.
All right. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had. Been very productive and very, it's probably been one of the best interactions we've had in quite some time. I'm not trying to dissolve that in any way, but I also know that per Tim, that we're being heard right now, and these things are what's going to go back and go into the notes. I have no desire to move forward on the comprehensive plan in 2023. I'd love to see those funds pulled out. Perhaps they could go towards the use of the if that's coming out of the general fund, which I'm not certain that it is, but if it's coming out of the general fund, perhaps that could go into the raises that are needed. I'd like to see, and I'll just go down through the list. If y'all can stop me and ask me questions if you want, but I'd like to see the promotions budget for the mayor reduced from 35,000 to 5,000. I asked for and received, thank you, an itemized list of what those funds have been spent for in 2022. and it's primarily breakfast and lunch. And we're nowhere near the 35,000. So I'm not saying you're spending beyond the budget. I'm saying that you're so far under the budget that I think that budget item should be reduced, because it's not gonna, I don't think there's any chance that it's used at 35,000. The $150,000 for the public safety building, DPW park. I think there was a list of all the things that would go into the planning for the buildings for all of those. I'd like to see that removed from 2023. I will promise you that I will come back and if it's in the 2024 budget, I'll approve it. Or I'll make a vote to approve it. I won't vote to approve it in 2023. If it ends up in the final version, I won't vote to approve that. Let's see. I do want to see the Chamber of Commerce and Z-Works both listed as itemized expenses under the Food and Beverage Fund. I think those are two organizations that are huge economic drivers for our community, and we do support them on an annual basis. I'd like to see it itemized so that they can better plan for 2023 as well, so they know what they're getting, rather than going through the grant process. I'd like to see. I'll skip that one. I'll let that one go. I think that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions on why, but I think you can probably read into why. So it's been, like I said, very, very good conversation. I'm not looking to take it down a negative path. That's just my thoughts on a few of the items.
Thank you. We're continuing. I know Becca and myself are all keeping notes so that we can go back and of all of this. Like all of those in the module.
You continue to provide input and questions. If you can funnel those to Kelly, we can work on a response that we'll distribute to all of us around the table here.
Clarify that for me real quick. Input above and beyond what we've provided.
If you have other feedback or input to share, yes, please.
So as you guys then sort of circle back and figure out, based on this input, this conversation, when would we then sort of hear the results of that conversation?
Like getting an updated version.
Yeah,
of the
just a
budget.
sense of like,
Mhm.
all right,
Yep.
this happened, this couldn't happen.
I was gonna say, would it be before the next council meeting, or would it be at the next council meeting?
And again, sort of what I said earlier, I just want to make sure that we don't get back to a point where like,
Right.
all right, well, we couldn't do any of these things, sorry, we filed the form with the state. We can't make changes now.
So we can take into account the comments that were made tonight, put those into an updated budget and recirculate that prior to anything that is advertised. I will say a couple of things. One, we've calculated the cost of the 13 employees and their corresponding equipment, so vehicles or uniforms or anything like that, at $2.1 million. Now that, I'm sorry, the 16 employees that we have currently in the budget. There are 3 firefighters
Taking those out.
that would then, well, we'll keep the expense in that line and actually have to add the expense for the 3 additional, and then you'll realize additional revenue coming in for the grant to correspond with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So that cost today is the 2.1 million. I know that was asked earlier.
The impact of the raise, if we were to do that, there will be some, changes as a result of benefits and salary, all of that. But if you just add the salary portions, those are already accounted for in the year-end budget numbers of 2023, because we've already taken into account the bonus and the salary increase of 4%. So if we add those together,
What, clarify that for me, because I thought that was going to be a 2022, but the original comment I thought was a 2022 appropriation.
so we took that as an
2023 expense.
additional appropriation from June through December.
Yes.
In the 18-month budget process.
Got it. Okay, that's the difference.
So that's
Got it.
why it's accounted for not in the expenses of 2023, but it's accounted for in the fund balances. Roughly. There will be some differences because of benefit costs accordingly. So that will not change that much, but it will be, there will be some there. As the budget is proposed today, the year-end fund balances proposed in 2023 would give fund balances of approximately 60% of next year's budgeted request. The policy that the town has is to have reserve balances of between 15 and 20%. That does not take into account the roughly $1 million that is also in the town's rainy day fund. That has been in the town's rainy day fund basically since 2011. That balance has remained fairly flat. So in fact, actually it's less today than it was in 2011. In 2011, it was 1.6 million. And today it's just over 1 million. And it's been that since 2015. So but those are also available funds for reserves. So the town would have plenty of reserves, but certainly sustainability of those expenses moving forward is something that we'll look at as we put the additional numbers together and circulate that back to everybody. Proposed today, Heather, is, I believe, to advertise and to submit the Form 1 and the Form 2 by October the 3rd. And then that 10-day window starts for your public hearing on the 17th. So the intent is to get that all finalized here in the next week. So we'll work to update these, get them back, and as you receive that information, any questions that you have, please circulate those back so that we can finalize something that would be advertised prior to the 3rd.
And I would just like to reiterate comments made by the council, like this is incredibly productive and helpful to have these types of engagements and dialogue. I mean, we should do that with all things. Like this is good. So thank you.
Yep. Great.
I don't have a gavel or
I was going to say, who adjourns? Whose meeting is this? All right, fantastic.